Hey guys, it's Wilson Breezer 325 here. It would mean a lot if you liked and subscribed the video. Anyway, tonight we will be taking a look at the power of Russian vodka and potatoes. So we are taking out the tier 3 Gangit here on the map straight on domination mode. So a couple things to know about the Russian battleships. Their damage control is unique and their ability to reload in 30 seconds, but there's a strict amount of usage, which is 4 usages with a reload of 30 seconds. So you should definitely be aware of how you're using these damage controls, which you'll see me explain later on by not using the damage control on one fire and saving it to when I have 2 fires. Because again, you really don't want to use all 4 in the beginning of the match, because one torpedo hit and that could be the end of you, because flooding does a huge amount of damage. So anyway, we spawned on Seaside with a Guisano and another cruiser behind us here. So the enemy destroyer spawns by A, along with our friendly destroyer who spawns at A. So right here, you're gonna see me do the exact same thing I did in my first video with the California. I pretty much just halt and relax here as I try and get one of the better angles of all 3 guns here, because the benefit of the Gangit is her firing angles are amazing, but the AP angles are not the greatest. As you'll see many times, you'll see plenty of ricochets with these shells. So we take our first shot at the Wyoming, and we get a penetration, standard penetration through the deck armor. So I've also been aware that most of my viewers do not know what World of Warships is. It is a World War II based game where you use World War I and World War II era ships such as destroyers, cruisers, and battleships. Those are the 3 different classes, and they're defined by their guns, speed, and armor. The cruiser's armor is medium to high tier depending on what type of cruiser. Their armaments are relatively small, but most of the time cruisers have torpedoes and have good concealment. Destroyers are the lightest armored class with normally 50 millimeters of armor, or 15 millimeters of armor, excuse me. They are normally penned with HE. And then the last class is the battleships, with the biggest guns and the greatest amount of armor. So anyway, the way to describe the different shell types in this game: armor piercing and high explosive shells. Armor piercing can do critical amounts of damage, such as hitting citadels or exploding armaments, such as magazine detonations, which is a famous way of how the Hood died, with a magazine detonation. And you see here, armor piercing salvo, that's a citadel. It does critical damage, as you see there. We did roughly 20,000 damage with that salvo there. 8. High explosive shells are most effective against cruisers, as they explode on impact and have a decent chance of causing fires. And the unique trait of the Germans and British is that they can penetrate a quarter of their armor piercing capabilities, as the high explosive shells take away the armor piercing capabilities for the fire chance, which is what makes them so good against destroyers, as AP will most likely overpen their thin 15 millimeter armor, while the HE explode on impact and do devastating damage on destroyers. So anyway, back to the Russian battleships. I hope you guys understand this game a bit more now, but besides the point. Another characteristic of Russian battleships is that their flat trajectory guns are easy to aim, but relatively horrible to fire behind cover. So it's a double-edged sword. You don't get to fire behind cover, but you get nice trajectory on your guns. Along with that nice trajectory, also comes with the fact that there's such fast arcing shells. It is pretty easy to ricochet these guns. So as you see there, we're waiting for that Kuma to cross that island to absolutely obliterate him, but we're just keeping an eye on that Isuzuchi right now. But again, the AP angles, the ricochet angles, is very high for a Ganget compared to other battleships. That is because they're high velocity, not high arcing shells, while if they penetrate, do a lot of damage, they are pretty relatively easy to ricochet off. And there you go, that's a Citadel, devastating damage, and that's our first kill of the match. So now we're just kind of sitting around and waiting. So there we go, we see an Isuzuchi kind of charging behind that island there, so we might decide to, we end up deciding to get him, as this Wyoming is just hiding behind a mountain. But notice how, also another thing to notice if you're playing this, you definitely want to look at the bottom of your screen to see how many guns you can fire in a certain salvo. So we take 3 shots, and there are the ricochets that I was talking about. 3 ricochets. Not the best, but our secondary set a fire on him, which is quite impressive. Again, 2 ricochets, 1 penetration. So, not the best again, and we let that Isuzuchi get away with basically broadside. Also, another thing to keep in mind when playing Russian battleships is you don't want to be exactly how I am right now. If there's no danger in what you're doing, then yes, by all means, sail broadside. But if you are in the beginning of the match and you turn broadside, you are in a huge risk to get citadeled and absolutely wrecked. So keep that in mind. Your citadel's pretty exposed through all tiers, tier 3 up to tier 7. So this Guisano needs help as he's being rushed by this Isuzuchi, and apparently the Wyoming can't rush the Guisano because of reasons that are ridiculous. Like, you see the Guisano doesn't know how to launch torps, misses his 2 torpedoes. So I'm about ready to absolutely unload on this Isuzuchi. And we're just kind of waiting, and we take our shot. But as you can see, 5 ricochets, but we do take out 2 of his main battery guns, which is pretty important as we kind of save, we save our Guisano. And we also defend him there, as any salvo aimed at the Guisano at that moment would have hit my armor, and we are able to take the punches in the citadels, unlike cruisers, which don't take salvos like that kindly. In fact, they eat them up in their citadel and get devastated, striked on. Essentially what that is when more than 3 shells hit the citadel and the ship goes from 100 HP to 0. Or exactly what happened to that Isuzuchi from our Koenig. So we see this Wyoming, who is sailing straight into, maybe not our trap, but straight into a trap, where he's gonna absolutely get unloaded on in about 10 seconds. But anyway, you see that saving your damage control using that high velocity shell can make you a pretty effective player at the Soviet battleships or the Russian battleships. And you see there, those are the low arcing shells. You're only 6 kilometers away and most of your shells hit the island, but that doesn't matter. 4 penetration, 62,578 damage, and that's pretty much it for the match, as we win by points. So that was a great game by all of us. That Guisano stayed alive again thanks to his help. I was able to stay in the battle longer because most of the battleships are focused on him and not me, which again, if you're in a battleship, you really have to pay attention and get your priorities straight, because I was right next to the Isuzuchi, but his guns went fast enough. So anyway, there's a recap on how good I did. Didn't make a lot of money, but anyway, here's the build of Mikhail Kedrov. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thank you for riding the waves of Ocean Breeze.